The linear transmission model of communication focuses on how a sender transmits information to a receiver. The captain's voice comes on the PA and says, "We are experiencing turbulence, please fasten your seatbelts." It's a simple, one-directional message with no feedback loop, and the response is predictable. The passengers buckle up. Transactional communication theory explains how people create meaning and arrive at a shared understanding in a two-way back and forth kind of dialogue. Face-to-face conversations between people get enormously complicated. We need to take into account the physical, the psychological, cultural, relational, and social context in which communication takes place. We send and receive information through our subjective lenses or perceptual filters. Our biases in interpreting information include our knowledge, past experience, age, race, gender, ethnicity, religion, family background, social status, and so on. Here's a biggie. What's the relationship between the people in the conversation? Distractions, lack of focus, and our emotional state might distort messages sent and received. If more people join the conversation, group dynamic and possibly even mass behavior come into play. People play games in relationships, for example, purposely manipulating information. Here is my copy of Eric Berne's famous book. It's an eye-opener. And then there's the language issues. Do we have the same ideas of the semantics and the connotations of the words used? Human communication is so complex that it's a small miracle that we understand each other at all. It's not easy to get along. Back then, I bought a used car that somehow had a high-quality German radio in it, and it brought in 50, 60 radio stations, even from Niagara and Buffalo and Rochester. My listening universe got much bigger, and it was like in science when a better instrument gives us a broader perspective. So the sensitivity and the sophistication of the receiver matters, but it is also important how we transmit signals. The most wonderful message can be lost if the signal is weak and transmitted at random times on random frequencies. If we want to make sure that our message is out there, we'd better broadcast strong and consistent signals on multiple channels. Bad transmission, bad reception, nothing happens. It's dysfunctionality. When we have good transmission and good reception, the precondition to constructing meaning exists. However, realistically, most of our transactional communication is not perfect, somewhat compromised, and it happens on a sliding scale between these two extremes. A meaningful conversation has to happen in good faith. Establishing that I'm not your enemy, you don't need to worry about me, is a prerequisite condition that goes back to our evolutionary past. If there's no rapport, I detect ill will, a hidden agenda, or prejudice. I may engage in a chatter on the surface, but I'm on my guard. I want to know that my partner in the conversation listens. There's a huge difference between passive hearing versus active listening. People who are used to idle chit-chat and pointless small talk are like buck birds that happily settle down to peck around in the dirt.
It's a living.
But lose their ability to fly. Now let's say that I hold a strong opinion on something and somebody presents new information that puts things in a new light. What if somebody comes to me with a convincing and rational argument? I will have a new understanding and reevaluate my position. I will do this because I listen to reason. So, I expect people to respond to my message, even if it means changing their thinking. Every proper transactional conversation creates meaning and becomes transformative. In Fury, there's a sequence where the American tank crew intrudes into a private home, find two women, and have dinner. It's a highly compressed movie within the movie. From the purest expression of love to raw emotions, clashing viewpoints, defiance, dealing with the absurdity of war, human vulnerability, showing leadership and facing pointless tragedy, it's all there. It would take a long time to unpack and analyze the layered and complex communication that takes place. Brilliantly, most of it is nonverbal, and all of it is highly transformative. What's happening there transcends the spoken words. The message is greater than the messengers, and we are looking at the hardest concepts to comprehend, the most dramatic and meaningful things in life. This is the kind of movie that brings you to tears. Interesting to note that when we read what the critics have to say about the sequence from Fury, invariably the message is lost on them. The transmission of the information is powerful and clear, except their perceptual filters do not allow them to receive it. Cynics and rarefied postmodernist movie reviewers are not comfortable with the concept of transcendence. I wonder how well they could understand and interpret Cool Hand Luke's famous line.
What we got here is a failure to communicate.
Now, if there is something transformative and transcendent, this would be the one. I'm not a war daddy or a cool hand Luke, but I'm a lucky fellow because a couple of times in my life I found myself engaged in a conversation that started to turn into magical, inspirational, and transcendental. I felt that I was a mere messenger, a conduit. And what was it about? It was about validating and affirming a person, reaching out and saying, you keep doing the good work because life is worth living.